Hey everyone, thanks for popping in. We are going to get started here in just about a minute or two.
Kimberly, it's great to see your face.
Thank you. I was going to say the same. And thank you for presenting today. I was just typing it in chat, but we're so happy to have you.
Thanks.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and kick this off.
Real quick, is Scott Anton in that you could give him presenter access?
I still don't have Scott,
Okay.
but I will definitely let him in. There he is.
There he is.
I'm going to make him a co-host right now. Okay, as he's joining, I'm going to cover my quick housekeeping slides, and we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Scott, if you can hear me, there he is.
I can. Good morning.
Welcome. All right, we're just about to kick this off. Welcome everyone to session number 21044, Modernizing and Extending the PeopleSoft HCM Experience at University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. We have three wonderful presenters with us today. I have a quick housekeeping slide, and I believe I have a quick commercial as well to run through, and then I'm going to pass it on over. So let's kick it off. It one time, promise. Whoa. I can't seem to get it to go to the next slide without exiting out and then moving. So welcome everyone. Please share your video, update your name. Please share your first and last name that you registered with. Everyone should be muted. You are able to take yourself off mute. So if you do have a question, Marcy and Lynette and Scott have said that they're good with kind of taking questions in the middle, but the chat's there as well. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll be watching that. If you have any technical problems, chat is the same place that you'll be using for those, and I'll try and help you with that. The recording of this session will be made available shortly here after the session concludes. That's all I have. I'm going to pass it on over to our presenters. Marcy, take it away. I'll stop sharing my screen. It is all you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marcy Fleming, and I work at the University of Oklahoma. And we just went through a huge consolidation project where we used Gideon Taylor's eForms to bring together lots of our business processes across our health sciences center and our traditional university. So we're going to talk about that today. But before I kind of dive into it, I did want to say we're a good sized group for kind of conversational presentation here. So if you have a question, please feel free to interrupt Lynette or I. We've got it's small enough that we can visit what seems relevant to you guys too, and not just what we've lived for the last 2 years. So with that, I'll get started on the slides. And I see we've got a chat going. Oh, those are all Tom's notes. All right, so we are a university that has a health sciences center. We have recently consolidated 2 PeopleSoft systems to 1. We're on PeopleSoft 9.2, it's on premises, People Tools 857, and we're on the GT framework 3.3. And I think we're an update or 2 behind on the framework. At 3.3, there's some things we're missing. I'm the director for HR systems, communications, and data solutions at the university. And Lynette has worked with us since the beginning of our consolidation project. Well, she came on about, I think we got approval last April, and she was our primary point of contact as we went through discovery and design and kind of problem solving, how we bring these really kind of, we're all one university and we've been one university, but we've done things really differently. And so she helped us find our path through that. And then in the middle of last summer, she kind of stepped back a little bit and we brought on some other, not brought on, but the rest of the GT team kind of became our primary points of contact through the rest of the project. But as a solution architect, Lynette helped solve so many of our quandaries. And one of them is the demo we're going to show you today, where we request position actions before you're allowed to actually put them in the system. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Lynette, would you like to tell us anything about what you do?
Hello, good morning. So primarily on the project, as we kicked off, I actually joined, I think, early in January of last year when you guys were having your first meetings to just talk about how you're going to merge data and maybe what the impacts were along the way. So I acted as the solution architect to help map things out, and then project manager as well until we transitioned over and made it through to UAT and the go live phases, and then phase 2 and beyond has been transitioned. So good morning.
Today we're going to kind of talk about our experience with PeopleSoft and eForms. We have a long history with Gideon Taylor forms. We've been on ePath, I think for 9 years or 10 years. It was before my time. And so we've had a lot of time with it, but the new framework, the 3.x framework, gives a lot of functionality that wasn't there before. We're going to talk a little bit about consolidation, look at our couple of our eForms, and then if we have time, spend a little bit on the where we're going slide. So who we are, we've got a health sciences center and a traditional research university. We've got 3 campuses. I think here the major thing to draw attention to is we've got a little over 20,000 employees, and there are a lot of different kinds of employees. Everything from like a graduate student who might have 4 appointments, each in a different department in a different position number, to a clinical person, to a faculty that has 1 appointment in 1 department. So it's a pretty big range of different kinds of workforce needs. I say that because it presents a lot of interesting challenges. We've been doing paper forms in the past. We still have lots of paper forms, but we've gotten rid of some of them. And like lots of people have experienced in the world of paper forms, they get lost. You don't know whose desk they're sitting on. They might go to a lot of different kinds of people, depending on your department and who you feel like it has to go to for approval. So it's not really standardized, and you can never see where they're at in the process. We lived this world before we put ePath in, and then we spent a good amount of time with 2 separate PeopleSoft systems that were heavily customized, and that had EPAF in them. So we could identify approval routes and know where everything was going. We knew what they were, but we were limited because that framework for the eForms required IT or GT to make updates. Our consolidation had some principles in it, like we must use delivered PeopleSoft. And so we had how do we make it work for all of our unique business needs? And that's where the eForms come in. Since we consolidated, we were able to bring our team together that support PeopleSoft and all the employment records. And so I've been able to train people and give people more responsibility and different responsibilities because we've been in one system. And then because we're in GT's 3.x framework, our functional team can make a lot of updates. And then we partner with IT for things where we need some augmentation of our skills, or we've got a bunch of concurrent projects, we've also continued to work with the GT consultants. But we know that there's a lot more we can do ourselves now. And so I get to train my teams on how to do that. So it's a really interesting kind of growth opportunity, and being able to dream it and then build it is a pretty rewarding experience. I can say, yes, we can do that. I'll have it for you in some amount of time, depending on what's going on. So this has kind of been our path to get where we're at now. In this consolidation project, we started the project in October of 2019. I came onto the project late October, November of 2019, and then we went live with a consolidated PeopleSoft and new forms on January 1st of 2021. So we had just a slightly over 1 year to do the whole project. When we completed it, we were able to deliver the eForms that you see here. We were working hard to not remove functionality that we previously had. So we had most of these forms before. New things that we added were the PreAuthorization 1 and 2 forms, which is what we're going to look at. And we also added this job description form. We had a version of it, but this was pretty different. The other thing that we were able to do is there's a whole new way to get into the forms. So what's on the screenshot that's on the right there is where we are able to show the related actions, which is a feature delivered in PeopleSoft. Use that related action feature to just show the options that are appropriate for me as an employee, me being, I'm the subject there. And so if I were faculty, I would have a different set of actions that my department administrator would see for me. And this is a win for us because it really helps people find exactly what they're looking for. And it has allowed them to kind of end up in the right place more often with less intervention from us, because the things on this menu make sense for that employee. If I wasn't a current employee and I was being rehired, my list would be much shorter. The other thing that eForms has let us do is one of the guiding principles and requirements of the project was that we maintain position management as it's delivered in PeopleSoft. And so that means you have a position number and a bunch of attributes that are attached to it, and it doesn't change without some approval process, or maybe never at all, depending on what the feature is. Position management requires position data and job data to stay in sync. And our experience with trying to manage position management in the past is that those two kind of areas of data would fall out of sync because we didn't have the EPAF updating the right things, and our technicians would update one part and not the other part. And so now with the new eForms that we deployed, they update all of the pieces of record keeping so that we keep the different data sets in sync with each other. And to me, as the kind of the data owner, that's a major win for us, because it drives me crazy, and maybe you too, when you pull a query and things just don't match across the different screens, and you're like, what is going on? So the ePath really helps with that, has helped us do that. So the form we want that I'm going to show you first is, we call it the pre-authorization form, and it replaces what this screen is going to describe. We have a business process at the university that was supposed to be temporary in 2008 when we had some budget restrictions, and it has become permanent. So we just accept it and bill for it. And it basically means they have to request permission to fill a position, create a new position, give someone a raise. They have to request that of all the decision makers, so whoever's in the workflow that this form goes through. They have to get approval for that action before they can list it, before they can set it on someone's, put it in their job data if it's a raise. And it's a little different than just the form that says this person gives a raise. This process explains, why does your department need another program administrator? What do they do? Where does the funding come from? Did you just get a new grant? Show us the org chart. Like the people who review these requests go into great detail, depending on what the job is and what department it is. They need a lot of information before they'll ever let us go further with actually entering the job in the system, putting it in the recruiting system, and ultimately hiring for it or giving the raise. And so in the past, that was on paper for both campuses. And then we advanced a little bit, and one campus got to go into kind of a third-party form system that didn't ever talk to PeopleSoft, while the other campus stayed on paper. And we had all the drawbacks of paper still. On the campus where we got to put it in the third-party form system, we had the drawback that it was like duplicative data entry again and again and again, and a lot of like manual checking is what they put in the recruiting system, what they requested is what the ePath is at the end when they hire them, what they requested, and there was just like all these manual work back and forth. So there's a paper freeze form, again, because it's paper, it could get approved by different routes depending on what department they're in. And then we had on one of our campuses a form where we would enter job description information for very specific for each position number. It had its own job description. And then that went through a bunch of approvals. And then it would flow, that data on the one campus would flow into our recruiting system, Taleo. And the listing would have a bunch of approvals. The other campus that didn't have this job description form had to double, like cut and paste into their job listing from a Word document. And then from Taleo, once the position's recruited for, then you separately do, again, another form. This one's in PeopleSoft, it was the ePath, and you would execute the action that you requested on the paper form way back at the beginning. And it would go through another round of approvals of perhaps the same people or perhaps different people. And they would all be checking to make sure that form matches what was asked for, because the processes didn't talk to each other. So my dream, when we knew we were going to get to work with Gideon Taylor in this consolidation project, was that we could take this ugly, complicated variable process and put it into PeopleSoft, so that we could reduce the duplicative data entry. We could see where it was flowing. We could control the steps in the workflow. We ultimately will get to control what it looks like in Taleo even. So that's what we're going towards, and it's live and we use it all the time. So our departments don't always love it, but they go through it for us. This is for a subpopulation of our whole workforce. So it's only staff jobs that have to go through this. If they're students or they're faculty or faculty physicians, they don't go through this process. They use just a standalone hire form or job change form. But a huge part of our workforce are in the staff category. So there's a lot of different transactions that go through this. So this is happening in PeopleSoft, except for where it goes to the recruiting system. So there's an eForm that is the request form. And we improved on the paper form where it needed improvements and otherwise kept the requirements that were defined and working in the paper form. We built in the request part. We also built in the job description, but instead of it being controlled by every single position number, the job description is now controlled by the compensation and classification team and feeds into this form when the job code is selected. It goes through a pretty lengthy workflow routing because a lot of people need to weigh in that this is a good use of our money. And then it flows into Taleo. We have an integration into Taleo. So where we had only one campus that could do that before, now both campuses can. And it goes into Taleo. There are still separate approvals for a job listing in Taleo, but it uses the data that came from the pre-authorization. And in the future, when things settle down and we're sure we like how the job descriptions look, we can actually make Taleo read only to the departments. So they have to live with what flows from the pre-authorization form that's already been approved. They have to live with that when it gets to the job listing. And the only people that would be able to edit that would be our central HR recruitment team. And what we think would be the output of that is we can reduce the number of approval steps that have to happen in Taleo because all those people have already seen it in the previous step. Then you select your candidate, you hire. We don't have an integration right now that goes from Taleo back to the PeopleSoft. So the new employee data is input as part of the pre-authorization step 2. The ability exists there where we can reduce the number of steps in the workflow. The departments weren't quite ready for that, so we added some steps back in for them, but we can reduce it there so that since they approved it in step 1, they don't have to approve it again in step 2. And then it updates through the component interface, both position data, job data, and yeah, I think it's those two for this form. So this is kind of how we conceived of it. And then we're going to just look through, I'm going to talk us through a demo of this. So this is the EPAF home screen. It looks something like this. First, if you're looking for a person to give a raise to, you're going to put their name in, find them, go to the related actions, go to request pre-authorization, and there we clicked on a pay raise. Then you would fill out all the steps of the pre-authorization for a pay raise. We're going to jump over and do it for a vacant position. So here is where you're putting all of the information about why you need this job. And so what the job is, why you need it, why it was vacant. The recruitment details section is part of what ports over to Taleo. You can put the introduction for the job listing there so your approvers can see what you're going to put in the job listing. And then on the next screen, we're going to put, this is where the job duties come in. This is from the job description page that compensation and classification gets to use. They can't edit that, the department can't. But this one box down at the bottom, they can edit. So if there's something specific for this job that they want to make sure it gets in the job listing, this is where we would expect them to put it. And then that saves to a table that's always attached to this position number. On this screen, you're going to handle FTE. You're going to do, we put the request for the amount of salary, and then we identify the funding distribution. And this is connected to our general ledger from financials. So they can only pick valid account codes, and they can create them here, but they have to be valid in financials to work here. And this allows the approver to see all of this as they're approving it. So they're like, oh yeah, I want you to fund it by that way. And then here they're going to explain, like, did they get a new grant? Did they open a new clinic? And they're going to say where that funding comes from in this group. And we summarize this and give it, or we help the committees that review these kind of suss out the important parts that they want here. Then depending on, no, not depending, always they have to attach a justification and an org chart. And sometimes the department might attach something that's slightly different than that, but our comp team is going to look for that information and make sure the committee knows to open it and review it. They submitted it there. If we want, we can see where it's going by clicking on that view approval route button. And this shows the whole workflow path for this form. And it will have, you click on it and see the people's names of who's next to work on it. Then that log down below shows who has seen it already. Now let's say we're going to hire somebody into that position. This person is going to be a staff person right now. Oh, sorry. That was if we were going to hire him into the position that like he's already our employee. This is what it's going to look like when we hire into a position, hire a person that doesn't work for us yet. So they go and they find the form that was approved, and that pre-authorization step 1 form connects to this hire form, the step 2 form. So they can't change things that were already approved. So here we're adding, this is the personal data. This is similar to how the previous EPAF worked. It checks to make sure that person's not already our employee. They're not in this case. We're going to put in all their personal information. This, when the form executes, will move over and fill in their personal data. And then we trigger some things off of this information. So if their citizenship status is not native or naturalized, we have other communication and notifications that like go off to our international office and our export control office. So they know that there's probably follow-up that needs to be done on this new employee. We've put the ability to put in the 2 addresses that we accept and copy one from the other. This version of this form is also what we use in self-service instead of what's delivered in self-service to collect their information. So there we created the person. So now they have, Gideon Taylor has its EMPL ID, and we're going in to to do the hire action here. And so there's a time travel supervisor. There's up to the right, there's who they report to. We collect primary campus because there's not another great way to see which campus they're on. That was a custom field in PeopleSoft. We've also been asked to track, are they working in our state or are they working outside of our state? And also, are they living in our state or they're living outside of our state? This triggers notifications to the right offices so that they can adjust taxes and do other follow-up that needs to be done. This form is going to do FTE and the funding, but if you notice there, you can't request, you can't put in here values that weren't on the pre-authorization, and you can't exceed what was on the pre-authorization form. So in the components of pay field there, they first put in more money than was approved, and it said you can't do that. So the having to kind of adjust that and put that check and balance on it is very helpful, because before it was all paper. This screen is where we assign our online training, all of our compliance training, and we keep that assignment in PeopleSoft, and it feeds over to our learning management system. This is probably the least favorite page of our whole ePath to people, because we make them check all the boxes and think about it. So now that we've been living with it for a while, we're going to add a slider that lets them say no to all, knowing that they need to come back through and put what really needs to be assigned. They can add attachments, and also there's some extra routing, like if it needs to go to our board and that sort of thing. And so that form would be on its way. and go to the workflow that basically approves that hire. So that's the very last, or it's the pre-authorization bucket on this step here. And then once it's approved and executed is when it writes to the position and job data.
And it does write to the position funding tables as well, the training, the custom training tables. And I think there's about 7 or 8 components that get updated.
There's a separate time supervisor table that ports to our 2-time systems. And so it writes to all those tables as well. So yeah, there are definitely quite a few component interfaces involved. Lynette, tell us what we went through.
So I mentioned I joined in January, which was still pretty early in the process. Marcy said, I think the most difficult or somewhat unique thing about this project is they really did have 2 completely separate instances of PeopleSoft. So they started as a university trying to map out and figure out how do we bring these 2 systems together, because all of their values and their set of tables were different. Their actions and reasons on job data, all of those things were all very different. So as they were working through that still and defining what their future system looked like as everyone came together, even things like one campus used position and the other one didn't. So there was really a lot that they were trying to balance out. So we started with our discovery phase. GT kind of follows this same methodology for all of our projects, and we step through it, and that helps us make sure that we get each unique situation taken care of, and we're focusing on the right things at the right time. So during discovery was really when we went through and we mapped out not just a single business process or a single form, but it was mapping out everything that touched those processes and how they interacted. And that's what really brought up the freeze form that Marcy talked about, and some other paper forms, or knowing that that the compensation team had specific KSAs that they wanted listed by job code, and their preference was that they manage that in their internal team instead of rolling it out to campus where they were having to make a lot of changes. So as we went through that process and did the whole mapping, then we also had to encourage that sense of, let's get uncomfortable. They had a significant number of workflow steps on both campuses, completely different between the 2 campuses. And so we really tried to do our best to shake that up and say, how much of this could just be a notification so it doesn't have to stop workflow? And like Marcy mentioned, some of it, as it was rolled out, people embraced and liked, and some of it they weren't quite ready to let go of that level of control. So the workflow and things have been continuous adjustment as the form has gone live, trying to get people through that. But initially in that discovery phase, it's that question everything. Why are we doing this? Do we have to? Does it need to stop the process? As we move into that next phase over, we try to balance out the best of what we like about an agile and a waterfall approach to project management. So waterfall is nice because you know the scope and you can easily define your budget going in, but it also is very difficult and usually not productive to try to do all of that design ahead of time. So we really tackle this in 3 phases where we're doing continuous design throughout the project in a controlled way. So we'll first tackle, what are all the fields we need? What do we want our pages to look like? What are the labels on the fields, and kind of the overall flow of the process? And then we'll go in and we'll develop that to maybe 70, 80%. And we then meet back up with the clients, Marcy and all of her team, and we involved people very early and often so that they could continuously see how things are progressing. And when we model it, there's time saved specifically to say, okay, now you're seeing your design, how are things looking? Let's adjust at this point if we're not looking right. So then we could go ahead and adjust And then we moved in and we'd finalize that phase and then add the logic to the form, or the brains. When do things conditionally hide and show? What are your valid values and things like that? And then we finished with the workflow notifications, what the navigation is, and security. So we would just keep cycling through and continuously modeling, so people get very involved and invested early on as much as possible. During this development phase, we were working with demo data, essentially, or things that we were just entering into the system. So all of their position numbers, their job codes, basically most of their setup was not available in the new combined environment until we were probably at least 50 to 60% of the way through, but the majority of it kind of came into 80%. So we were just modeling and adjusting as we went through. Of course, migrations, the next thing. During this migration phase is where we do our full system hardening and a full solution test. And then we roll into the UAT portion of it. Another thing that worked well with the OU team is while we rolled into UAT, that's our opportunity to pretend what production looks like. So our teams at that point were really overlapping each other and doing a lot of training and saying, okay, like if this happens, how do we fix it? What does this mean? How do we troubleshoot in the system? So that they got a lot of overlap with us, again, to the extent possible, because they were doing a whole system go live at the same time. And then throughout go live, and we've stayed on to help with some phase 2 things as they're continuously changing on their campus and taking on a bunch of other projects. We've continued to help in that way. And the balance here, when we look at our functional staff versus our technical staff, really varied depending on the phase that we were in. Discovery is really heavy and functional. Even our design, our development phase is really heavy functional, especially in the first, 50% of that, because the functional people are in there putting the fields on the pages, changing all the labels, actually working with the form to make sure the flow is correct. And then our technical people came in towards the end of that to add any of the additional features, like the component interfaces, the integrations between the various systems that Marcy mentioned. I think we have 3 or 4 integrations outside their HCM PeopleSoft system. That's where we really leveraged our technical people to come in and help out. Obviously, technical is very important in the migration phase, and then would kind of drop off as we were going through UAT and go live as an ad needed basis just for those technical people. So we really just use that approach. As you saw, they had many business processes, not just one that we tackled. So we had these going on in parallel, and some of the business processes were in different phases as we went through until we got to that one big go live when their system went live.
Thanks, Lynette. I will say the order, like, I'm glad that you brought up that we were implementing the whole system at the same time we were doing this. If we had our dream about it, we would have gotten to focus on the eForms and learning the new framework and kind of working hand in hand, and being part of the build of the eForms, but the project just didn't allow us to do that. And so we were able to share the workload with Lynette and the GT team quite a bit. All right. I want to show another form. This one's pretty short. This is the form we use to provide extra pay to people. And this would be like for an award, or they're teaching another class. We've used it to pay our clinical incentive pay. We call it our professional and practice plan. We use this form to process that. And before we kind of get to it, what's really, I think, remarkable about it, because I live with these forms all the time, is that we got it on one screen. And so it's pretty simple and straightforward. And we were also able to add functionality that was requested by some of our distributed central processing teams. So there's an office that does all the initiation for like 50 departments. they're not part of central HR or central payroll. They sit out there, but they're not using their own funding. They're not doing things on behalf of their own department, right? They're doing it on behalf of those 50 departments. So they needed to be able to show on the form which department would be paying for it, so that then that department's workflow would be used. So in the past, that central processing office would do an ad pay, and the ad pay form would flow through their workflow, like for their own department, not the workflow of the department they're working on behalf of. So we were able to add a feature on here that's called the pay from department box, where you can shift where the workflow, what workflow it will use. And this one's pretty quick. So again, it's our EPAF homepage. You're going to find the person you want to give the ad pay to. Gideon Taylor's lucky, hired, paid, everything extra today. You go here to the add additional pay choice, and it opens this one-page form. You can see the person's job data from this upper left-hand corner button if you needed to review it while you're here. And then this area, this pay from this department box, this preparer doesn't have access to pay from that department. So they're going to have to pick a department that they are allowed to pay from and allowed to send a form through the workflow from. The earn codes there are tied to specific GL codes, which we'll see in just a second when we get to the funding. We were able to control the dates, so that pay period end date is the day that it's going to, the period that it's going to pay on. We require a justification for ad pays depending on the earn code. And so we could get really granular with that. And then the next row under that justification box lets you justify or choose if you're going to use the funding that's on the position or the funding, a different set of funding information. And so here they can copy down chart filled string into the boxes below that are going to be the ones that are used, this payment funding box. And then you can adjust the distribution amount. And then this is what writes, like Lynette said, it writes, well, in this case, it's going to go to Payline, where we see these other boxes and the other forms. It writes to the department budget table when we're changing funding. It does an edit to make sure that it equals 100%, because we all know that that is completely a problem when it doesn't. Here, again, they're going to pick the GL codes that are allowed from financials. There's a integration there, and it checks that. That slider that it just slid to yes means that it requires additional routing, so you can, it's not permanent routing. It's just if they needed it for that. And then that last page was what its workflow would be, which looks the same as it did on the pre-auth. So the simplicity of that is really nice. Go ahead, Lynette.
I think some of your big wins there that people really appreciated was being able to see the position funding while they were in AutoPay. Previously, they might want to pay on position funding, but they might have just screwed it up a little bit as they were re-entering it. So the fact that they could see that all right there and then make the decision, yes, that's good, or they could copy some of it down and use some of it, but alter a little bit of it if there were reasons that they couldn't pay on a certain account because it was an AutoPay or the type of payment that was in there. And then another thing you didn't see on this form that was in the prior version carried forward and approved, that was a big win for the administrative team, is there's a setup table for each one of those AutoPay pay codes where they can control with very easy setup and toggle, you know, who can use this pay code, what's the workflow that's required with that, and can vary it between the campuses as well as they need. Which I think those were really big things along the way that you guys came up with that were, it just helped with both managing the form and the user experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's a setup table, when the accounting team in financial says, okay, now this earn code needs to use this GL code and only this GL code, we can, as the functional support team, can go in and just add that on the setup table. We don't have to ask IT to do it. We don't have to get programming from GT. It becomes very configurable to us as a team, and it allows us to respond much more quickly, which is great. It's not something we had before. Related to AdPay, we had the ability to do a batch load on AdPay. So our professional practice plan payments for our clinicians, the departments are doing 200 of those or 300 of those every single pay period. And to click through a single form like that every time is really tedious for them, especially if most of the information is not changing from pay period to pay period. The funding changes, is the same, the employees the same, it's just the amount that changes. So they have a template that allows an Excel template where they can fill in all the data that would populate the form. When they submit that batch load, it creates all the separate forms automatically, and then they can mass approve them through like a snapshot view, which is what's on the screen right now in the Action Center. So each of these blue and green boxes represent one AdPay form, and they can see everything they need right here. They can review the justification from here, and they can approve them in mass or one at a time from here. They can also, if they need to see the form for some reason, like there's a granular detail that we didn't include in the summary, they can also open the form from here. We have extended this batch process to also be used on mass terminations. We are in the middle of a merger right now, and we are having to remove 1,500 people from our workforce all in the next 5 days. Don't ask, the timeline was insane, but we're doing it all this week, and they're getting to use this batch process. And with one of the GT consultants' help, we were able to program, I think it was 2 of them, but we were able to program the batch process to put everything on the termination form that was required for this transaction. So it's really defined for this particular thing. And what that allows, so I said we're doing 1,500 this week, but the batch load template only requires their EMPL ID. And then everything else is programmed. It generates the termination e-form for every single one of those people. Then the approvers will all get to use the Action Center to approve it. And us and HR records can also approve them this way. And so 1,500 is a lot, but it was worth the work we did to get to where we are today. And we set it loose in the wild so that they could do it that way. And I don't know, I mean, any other way to do this would have been really terrible and everybody would have cried. So this was, being able to do those by batch is a really great addition. We can also do, we also built a very simplified pay increase batch form for another process that's also going on this month on a very tight timeline. So it's been having this feature is very, very helpful. Success in our project, when we were preparing for this, we were talking about what was so important to make this all work. And in the seat that I'm in, we had extremely strong and clear support from our executives. The timeline was set in stone. The how we should execute in PeopleSoft, don't customize, do it all as it's delivered as much as possible. Review every integration, every report, and every customization just to be sure we actually need it. And then we must consolidate the systems. Yes, you have the power to bring those business processes into alignment, And yes, we have support to augment our staff, which is extremely lean, with consultants. And so without that, there is no way that we could have done this consolidation in a year's time. And just to add, we were also, parallel to this, our IT people were also all involved, and the financial functional people, in a similar consolidation for financials, PeopleSoft financials. So a lot was going on around this. The other thing we got from our executives is a very strong commitment to continue with eForms. And this is the path to go. We want the new car, and we want to make it do all the things. And so we had interest and support in making that happen. And when we needed to extend the engagement because of a bunch of mitigating factors, we got support for that. So it was great. The other piece that was important for our success is that we had a good project team, and the GT consultants were consistent the whole time, which was great. We had turnover in another team that we were working with, and that was a little hard. The GT team is very much an experts in their product and how it interfaces to PeopleSoft. And they also became like an extension of us. They were willing to become an extension. So they were part of our customer support when we went live. They're part of our updates now, because we're pulled in multiple directions. We've extended that. And they just feel like they're committed to our success as much or more than we are. Their attention is very focused on us. Our OU team is great, and most of us have been here for a long time. So we have knowledge, institutional knowledge of what we've done. It's just, there's not enough of us. And so we're pulled in a lot of directions. And so getting that consultant support is helpful. And then our team included also a whole group of experts from Huron, and they did the PeopleSoft update with us, or consolidation implementation with us. Brief look at what we've done since January 1st. We've got 40,000 forms initiated in the system. We've onboarded 1,400 new employees through the system. We don't have online onboarding, right? The onboarding is, we collect a bunch of paperwork and then we do the personal data form and hire them through the ePath. But there are 1,400 new people. We have 800 users that are either initiators or approvers of some kind. And we have a really small staff that supports it right now. So we've got a medium-sized team, about 9 people that deal with all employee records, but our effort is about 2.5 FTE that we can dedicate to actual support of PeopleSoft and the eForms and enhancements and that sort of thing. And then right now our attention is like pulled in a million directions. So we're really feeling the understaffed part there. And we also have 3 PeopleSoft developers, HR PeopleSoft developers in IT. And they would normally be supporting both the core PeopleSoft and the eForms, but they're also pulled in multiple directions right now. So I don't know how everybody else in the world is feeling, but we need some more staff. We are committed to doing eForms. On the left-hand side are 4 things we have lined up from HR, but we have also introduced this into our other PeopleSoft systems. So Campus Solutions manages student records, and they use the new framework of eForms now for those items. And then we are in design for grants management in our financial system. Lynette, tell us where we're going.
Yeah, so I'm sure many of these will sound familiar to you guys, but just as far as eForms trending is going at OU and as well as across all of our customers right now, we're really seeing that people are extending online services to the broader organization. So historically, we saw a lot in terms of HR forms, hiring, terminations, leave. things like that, which was true for OU in their past versions of the forms. But we're seeing now a lot more people are saying, hey, you know, I have this really quick small form, especially around COVID, where they're building these smaller forms or they're extending into a lot of different areas of their organization. And one of those key things that have come out of that are external participants. The first biggest place we see external participants come in is in onboarding, because you have these people who don't yet have logins to PeopleSoft. You need to collect information from them before you give them their login to PeopleSoft to know if they're already have an EMPL ID and they might need to accept the offer, things like that. But we're also seeing clients push that boundary of saying, oh, you know, one of our counties needs to give people parking permits, and they're not even employees. They will never have a login to PeopleSoft, but now they're opening up these forms, inviting external participants to only access that form, but then they have all of their direct connections into PeopleSoft and the integration's already there, where they're managing it in one central solution. We're seeing people use this for more processes. So I think historically things were, you know, oh, there's this paper form and now I'm going to transition that. But we're seeing people grow these solutions into things, for example, for an FMLA management solution. It's not just a form where I submit and request FMLA, but now this is a living, breathing thing where someone submits the FMLA request, and now we're tracking every letter that you have to send along the way, even before you get to that approval, and it's all packaged together into one place. They can then submit if they're on intermittent leave, get their intermittent leave reported. And then the process doesn't complete until that leave ends. Either the employee comes back to work, or there's another reason that the leave ends, they're starting a different type of leave or terminate from the organization. And that all ties in together with the EPAF forms to put people on leave status within job data and things like that. The quick form creation is another one. You know, you don't have to have it exactly perfect just to go live, but more and more people are just saying, hey, let's duplicate what we have in the PDF, and then we'll just do a phased approach where we learn from people entering it, and we implement our time and money based on what we're finding in those forms to just improve it over time. But if you can get people into the system using that form, it's in a central place and it's easy to just make enhancements to the form along the way.
Hey, Lynette, before you go on to the next bullet, Kimberly, can you ask your question? I want to be sure we get your question before we run out of time.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I was just curious, you're a large organization and you have so many forms that you created. How did you handle the training for all of the managers and ongoing for new managers with so many forms? Do you have like...
It's a great question. And we also wondered how we were going to do that. What we first thought we would do is build job aids and video training ourselves last year while we were also doing everything else. And that was not possible. And so we then included creating job aids and videos in our engagement with Gideon Taylor.
Okay.
And so we created, I think there were 13 videos and then probably like 25 job aids that are full of screenshots and step-by-step, this is what you put here. And just, you know, making our decisions digestible, like all of our business process decisions digestible for the common user.
Right.
And so we put all of that out on a website and we told people where to go find it. And most of them have at this point. We've been live for 6 months. At the very beginning, we had to process payroll about 3 days after we went live. So we told everybody, hold all your transactions before the Christmas holiday. Okay, come back from Christmas and you have 2 days to enter everything.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really hard on people. But they went along with it. They referred to the training, which was not all available before Christmas. They couldn't
Yeah.
see anything before the holiday. They had to come back and they had to jump right in. And
Wow.
we could not have done it without the documentation and end user documentation that Gideon Taylor put together for us. And we're using that still. We've modified some things in the forms since we went live, but not enough that we have to remake the material wholesale. I will say our financial office that went live in the middle of last summer, they went live with PeopleSoft Financials. They required training before people could get access to the new system. But they had time to do that. But since people needed to process payroll for us so quickly, we just asked, we're like, please jump in and just do it. And we had pretty very close to 24/7 customer support needs, and GT was part of that. Not everything rolled out perfectly in the whole system, so Huron and GT and all of our staff were January was very a lot of work, very hard, but we got there.
It sounds like it. I know we're close to time, so but thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I hate to do this,
Okay.
but I have to.
Go for it, Tom.
I do have to cut you guys off, and I'm very sorry. Do you want to, if anyone has any follow-up info, do you have a slide with your email? There you go.
The last slide in the deck, and the deck is loaded in the presenter portal, so you guys should be able to find it.
Perfect.
And
And
really, if you have more questions, or if you would like to see what we created as training, you want to shoot me an email. I'll show you where we have it. It's public.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
so if you would, everyone that attended, please do take a second to fill out the session survey. It's in the event app on your phone or laptop or tablet. Click the session in your schedule and then click session feedback. The other piece here is I just want to give a big shout out and thank you to all of our sponsors, of which one was featured here with Gideon Taylor. Go take time, check out their info in the virtual hall. Some are giving away stuff. Go check them out. That's my plug. That's all I have. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you all for attending. I will get this session posted online here in about 20 minutes. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.